Hello, everybody. Today we are talking about big money for artists in terms of grants. Welcome to Art Prof. We are a global art party. Artist grants are something that I don't think a lot of people even know about.
I think it depends on who you are and what type of artist you are, because I think that there are a lot of grants for, say, people that do sculpture or public artworks or murals, but I think it comes up less commonly for, say, painting or drawing or things like that, because those are a commodity already.
The pottery people do have a lot of grants. I'm a
Yes.
little bit jealous.
Yes, I see them all the time.
The most important tip we're going to give you today is to research, especially your eligibility. Why is the research out of everything the biggest thing to address?
You don't want to waste your time, because I was just talking with Clara before the call. Your time is your most valuable asset, and grants, they take a long time to get through that process of applying. And a lot of grants have very specific eligibility requirements. I was recently on a call or trying to apply to a grant for a new film with LIEU'S, and on the outset, it looked as if we would be a great fit for it. We seemed to meet a lot of the requirements, but then on an info session, we found out that because I had been in school during when one of the previous things that we made was put out into the world, that we didn't count, because I had been in school during that time, and they say specifically you can't be in school at all when you've released your previous films. So there's random stuff like that comes up. It can be the littlest thing, and you can be excluded on the littlest thing. So it's so important. Don't give yourself that heartache of excluding yourself but having done all the work.
And I have found that most of the grants I'm not eligible for one reason or another. I think sometimes we look at grants and we see, oh, there's so many listings. I can apply to all of these. And I go through the listings, and more than half of them I'm not qualified for one reason or another. This is the Utah Arts Fellowship, which I just applied to last week. And you can see there are a lot of requirements here. You have to be 25 years or older. You have to be a Utah resident for 2 consecutive years. You cannot be a student. You cannot be a collaboration. And you cannot have immediate family members on the board. It's so specific. And I think it's easy to miss those little things
Yeah.
that you talk about.
And some of them won't even appear on that initial page. I mean, hopefully they would, but some of these things, like the Pollock Krasner grant, is a whole packet of information you have to go through. And so, as part of your research, what I would really, really recommend is, if the grant has an info session, go to that info session, because you can also ask your specific questions about your own needs and have those answered in a way that's catered to you. It takes a while to go through things, and then sending out an email last minute about whether you qualify or not, that's going to be so stressful for you. So don't wait till then. Just get it over with in the info session.
The other thing to look at is how time consuming is the application. Because when I applied to the Massachusetts Cultural Council grant, which I got after 20 years of applying, it was the easiest application. It was just fill out this form, 8 images. I was done. And I already had an artist statement ready to go. Whereas a really big grant like the Guggenheim, which is one of the biggest
Yeah.
grants, not just for artists, it's for scientists and stuff like that, that is a major application. I think the artist statement has to be like 3 pages. You need a
Mm,
proposal, you need a
yeah.
budget. It's really intense.
Do you have to be nominated or referred for that
No,
one as
not for the
well?
Guggenheim.
You can just apply for the Guggenheim.
Yes. That's the other thing. There are some grants you can't
Yeah.
even apply to them.
Right.
They are by nomination.
Maybe it's
And so sometimes I
MacArthur.
read the whole thing and then I realize, oh, I can't even apply.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's especially good to check on those requirements right now. I know a lot of these types of grants are funded by the government, by the state or federal government in some way. And at least if you're in the US, there's a lot of shifting policies right now. So you want to be extra careful about knowing what all the parameters are for the grant.
Let's jump ahead to number 8 because this is relevant because most states have some type of local arts council and they usually have a state funded grant, but you got to keep an eye out because sometimes they change. I
Yeah.
got really lucky that Massachusetts grant, the year I won it, it was 10,000 and the next year they cut it in half.
Yeah. Yeah. Usually it's a cut too. It's not an expansion.
And some grants just end. There was another
Yeah.
grant, the Sustainable Arts Foundation, which was around for several years. It was for artists who had parents. And I checked recently, they're like, nope, they're gone.
Yeah. There, I guess the flip side of that is there are new grants that come up all the time, especially private grants that I see that will hit some of these groups like parent artists, things like that. But it really requires constant checking in. You can't just assume that something will be the same next year, as you said.
Shannon's asking, is there such a thing as being too new to apply for grants? What about if I'm going through a style change?
I think that that's a great question. I think for applying to grants, usually, in my experience, usually they require a lot of things, like a lot of documentation. And so if you're new on your journey, it might not be the right time for you yet, or you would want to look for something that is maybe more simple and requires less. But I don't know, Clara, what's your experience with grants?
I think it's fine to have a style change, but most of these grants really do want a mature, cohesive body of work. So if you have a style change, just make sure that your portfolio is reflective of that one style. You don't want to show both, especially if they're incredibly different, because then you'd have to have 2 different artist statements to fully explain, and that's not such a great thing. But this is a very important point in terms of whether you're too new or anything. What's going on here with this terminology?
Ah, I hate it. I hate it so much. Probably anybody that's applied for an open call or a grant or just anything has come across these terms: emerging artist, mid career artist, late career artist. I think that's also a thing. But the vast majority of people in the world, I think, fall under the emerging artist, but it's so broad. There are rarely any specifications around emerging artists. Every grant is for an emerging artist, but no one says what an emerging artist is. And so you're left in this space being like, do I qualify? Do I not qualify? I don't know. I don't know what I am anymore, Clara. What is your experience with these grants?
Emerging artists usually means you're somebody at the beginning of your career. I am not an emerging artist. I'm too old to be an emerging artist. However,
But it's not
I
based
have
on
been.
age.
Say that again?
It's not based on age either,
No, it's
unless
not. You're
it
right. I
says.
just no. I should amend that and say I've been in the field long enough
Yes.
that I am not considered an emerging artist. So you're right about that. You could be 50 and it's the beginning of your. But see, this is why it's confusing.
Yeah. Yeah. I would look for, if it says emerging artist and you're feeling weird about it, you should contact the people who run the grant and say, what do you consider an emerging artist? I've seen some grants say, Oh, that this means that you have not yet had a show at a major gallery or an institution in New York or whatever art hotspot, or you have done less than such and such residencies, that type of thing. But you really want them to specify so you know whether you qualify or not.
Another way to try to figure out what they're looking for is if you look up past grant recipients. For example, the Guggenheim is for mid-career and up artists. And if you look at the people who have won it in the past, I can look at that and say, okay, I'm 23. This person has won the Rome Fellowship and they've been a tenured professor for 20 years. I'm probably not a good candidate for that. And that's very revealing.
Yeah, it's really helpful too to see what sort of artwork generally the grant is interested in, or what sort of people beyond career that grant is interested in. Sometimes these places have specific projects or fields that they really try to push. I see a lot of stuff for, say, performing artists, a lot of installation based type stuff that comes up a lot. And so you also just really want to see if you're the type of thing that you do and the concepts that you deal with and the audience that you deal with fits those categories that the grant seems to prefer.
If you look at past grant recipients and it's all fine artists and you're not, that's probably not the best fit. Now, granted, some of these are really wide. I looked at the artist fellowship grant that I just applied to, and there's so many things that they mention as being just fine. For example, I don't even know if I can find it. There's so much information, but the media that they say, it was like everything. It was like installation, illustration, painting. I was like, okay, so it's everything. And I looked at the past grant recipients, and almost all of them were 3D artists. And I was like, okay, I guess the juror likes 3D artists.
Yeah. Oh, but that brings up a good point too. It's also really good, in addition to checking the past winners of the grants, to also check the jurors that are for this cycle, because the jurors, I think, tend to change. Usually it's I mean, every grant is different, but sometimes there's a board, like a couple people stay the same, but other jurors switch out. So the type of artwork that is, I guess, favored, or the biases will change from year to year. And you want to see if the current jurors are interested in the type of work that you do.
The juror for the Utah Fellowship, Lana Mador, San Antonio Museum of Art's curatorial department, serves as the associate curator of modern and contemporary art. In terms of the juror, I don't think you should not apply because the juror is a certain person, because applying is no skin off your back, but I just like having all the deets.
Unless it costs a lot of money and time to do so. If it's like they're very clearly not into 2D paintings, I'm not going to apply because it just takes too much time. I can wait till next year when there's a different round of jurors, you know?
And Advent says, is this applicable in Canada? That's another place where you have to check eligibility. Some grants are international, some are not. And actually, I used to apply to the Elizabeth Greenshields Foundation, which is in Canada. And you know something? After several years, they wrote me a personal letter that said, stop applying. You no longer are an emerging artist. I was like, ouch.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
I know. It's like, wow. Sorry for applying.
That feels very aggressive.
It was very aggressive.
They could just ignore your application.
But that's another grant that is super specific. They
Yeah.
will not look at abstract art. It has to be representational or figurative. And so if you're an abstract painter, don't apply to that grant. It's a waste of your time.
Yeah, you know what? I have not applied to Elizabeth Greenshield since, I don't know, when I was just out of college. And it's been because I didn't consider myself like a figurative painter, but now maybe I should at this point.
You should apply.
Yeah.
Sonnet is asking, do you think with the current administration in the US,
Mhm.
we will see lots of cuts? Have you already seen cuts take place? I haven't been paying attention to individual grants, so I don't know about grants, but I do know that across the board, the arts foundations and performing arts center, like if you guys look at what's happening with the Kennedy Center,
Yeah.
it's not good.
Yeah. I would say we're sort of in a strange period right now because, we're only 6 weeks into this new administration, and a lot of these cuts have been pretty recent, and they're also contentious in, uh, in the courts right now, or they're waiting on the courts for a final decision. And probably the money that is available right now is already there. So there have been conversations that I've been on with grants that talk about sort of the uncertainty and sort of this like wait and see approach. But there are at least from what I've seen, there haven't been too many like cuts right now. I've seen say positions canceled, searches for faculty, things like that. They're sort of adjacent to these sort of application things, and grants being like, oh, we don't know if we'll continue next year, but this is probably going to be a change that you see sort of in a rolling basis over the next year or so, I think.
Anna says a lot of grants have alternating categories each year, like the New York Foundation for the Arts grant only has painting every few years. Yes, and other grants like Creative Capital, I'm always so confused how they do it because they do it by city. So they say, okay, this year, artists in Houston, Texas, and Chicago, that's who we're looking at. And so you can see the demographics can be literally anything because Salinas is also saying age cutoffs. For example, there's a painting fellowship. I think you have to be 45 and older. And
Yeah.
I'm like, yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I've seen stuff where there's also age cutoffs, yeah, where they say people over 25, or a very common one is you cannot be in a degree program at the time of applying, or the artwork that you've done cannot be done during a degree program.
But there's also ones that are specifically for students.
Yes.
For example, I think College Art Association has one for MFA candidates.
Oh, it's probably for art history though.
Maybe.
I don't think if there was one for CA that was CAA for artists, I would have been on that in a heartbeat.
Okay, guilty is charged.
Yes.
Submit early.
Yeah.
Because it's all online applications and usually it's due at 5 p.m. You don't know, maybe everybody submits at 4:55 and then
Yes.
the system crashes and then you're screwed.
You can probably bet actually that that's what's going to happen, because everybody always does this. Every artist I've talked to, yeah, we all submit right before the end. And so you will be doing yourself a favor if you submit early, because one of the most sad and humbling and humiliating things I have had to do is email the support system and be like, hi, your website crashed and I can't submit my application, and it's 11:59 p.m. and I want to put it in. And they sort of like shake their heads. They're like, come on. I mean, everybody's been very nice, and usually they'll still let me submit. but they really don't want you to do that. And I can never tell if that might have a say in the application process or the review process where they're like, this person really doesn't have it together. They submit it like they had to email support to get their thing in at 11:59 p.m., you know?
It probably doesn't matter because I've juried stuff in the past and they just show us the work. They don't say
Okay.
anything about Lauren's so lame with her application and she followed our tech support. Okay, another thing to consider, the artist statement is way more important than you think it is. And again, guilty as charged. When I was younger, I never really spent that much time on them. But now, as I'm older and I've sat on juries, I'm realizing that people vastly underestimate how important it is.
Yeah. I've had artist statements that have really changed my mind about the work. And I know that it
Me too.
sounds kind of unfair that it should be about the work, but I think when the grants are looking at artists, they're also looking at the artist's journey, the artist's person themselves. It's not just about your work, it's about who you are as a person. It's almost like a job application or something. And they want to make sure that the qualities of the artist match or will do very well with the grant. So part of that is making sure your artist statement is really in line with who you are and with what you make.
And lucky for all of you, I just released yesterday a video on writing an artist statement in real time because we can give you all the tips and things to avoid. And we do have several videos that go over that. But to my knowledge, there isn't a video out there because I looked for it that talks about step by step what you have to go through. If anything, this video, I think, is a confirmation of number one, how difficult it is, number two, how long it takes, and how little things really matter. I spend so long looking up words on the thesaurus. I double check the definitions of things. There's so many little things.
I need to watch this video. It'll make me feel less alone while I apply to grants.
Well, the number of times that I say, "Oh, that sounds dumb," I think I say that at least 6 times in the
Oh,
video.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, man. Everything just sounds so horrible when you first put it on the page, and you gotta learn to be okay with that, but it feels so bad.
We have a comment from Salinas who says, "Triple check your file labels. I swear I named my files correctly for a residency, but one mislabeled and instantly
That
disqualified."
happened to me. That happened to me. Yeah, and they even wrote me about it. They said, "Your file name is wrong." I know, I love it when it's so funny when they send, like, a specific personalized reply. And you know what, though? They said that that was what disqualified me. If I had done it right, I would have gotten it, which, hurt even more. So I applied the next year, I made sure I did it right, and I got the grant.
What?
Isn't that wild?
That's
This is when I was, like, 20, I think. I don't know what the difference is between a scholarship and a grant, if there's difference in those words, but it was technically a scholarship, but I had to go through the same sort of, well, no, what's this? It was the Albert K. Murray grant. So maybe it was considered a grant. I don't know. That doesn't matter. But that's what happened with that one.
I always read the requirements, geez, probably 5 or 6 times because there's so many little things. So
Yeah.
this is where not only do you have to know all of the details, but again, it's so easy to miss those tiny things, which can
Yeah.
determine if you're eligible or not.
Yeah, definitely read the image requirements. That is a huge one. Some of them also say things like don't put detail shots.
Yeah.
They're very specific about the type of image you use, or as I think Selena said, to not put. You have to make sure the file has the right name. If it's got your name in it, sometimes they don't want to see that. It's a totally blind process, so that stuff is important to them.
that leads us to photographing the work. Usually, if I'm posting stuff on social media, I'm like, just do it on my phone. But most phones are not, well, none of them, I think, are as good quality as the
Right.
DSLR camera. And so when I shot the photos for the Utah grant, even though I have plenty of phone photos, I took the time to shoot them on my DSLR and tweak them in Photoshop. And that tweaking is not fast.
No, it's not. I'm going to disagree with you, Clara, on this though.
Of course you are.
And I do think that phone photos, as long as they are clear and have good lighting and all that, are fine for applying to grants. And I say this because usually there is a image size, data size requirement for those images. They're going to be looking at on their computer screen at probably what, 72 DPI, whatever. Like they want a small file. And so because it's not printing, it's not going to print, and it's low res anyways that they want, I'm not gonna take out my DSLR and do my photos just for that, or I'm not gonna worry about it too much.
I'm going to disagree with you and tell you
Okay.
that some of the grants don't have specifics on how big of a file. Also,
Tell
I've
me
sat
which
on,
one.
there's some, the Utah one didn't have it.
I have never seen a grant that doesn't have a file restriction size. It's all like 5 MB or whatever. Actually, you guys in the chat, tell us what the restrictions are for file size, or if there aren't any. I'm very curious. But okay,
It's
Utah
not
does
that
it.
there aren't any. It's just not every grant is that specific. So check
Yeah.
those details.
Yes.
But I'm also going to disagree with you on the DSLR thing. Sometimes it's a big screen they project the stuff on, because when I've sat on fellowship committees, sometimes it's like 5 of us, and so we aren't looking at it on a laptop. And I did sit on a jury where we literally had 30 seconds to decide. They gave us a paddle and it would say yes or no. That was the first pass. Now, of course, when we get to the last 5 finalists, there's more of a discussion. But if it's on a big screen and you look at it for a short period of time, that's a big impression that you're making. And especially my work in particular, you can't really see the scraping very well. And of course, we can't guarantee that they're going to look at the work this carefully. But I always err on the
Yeah,
DSLR.
that would be my reasoning for actually going for the phone image, because they're not going to be doing the zoom on it like that. They're going to be spending 30 seconds. And also when you project onto a big screen, you're not zooming into the image, you're taking the image, generally you're taking the image from the computer and you're making it larger. So whatever's on the computer is just the same but larger. It's not zooming into the pixels on it. But this is very nitty gritty. We have different opinions, and so you should just go with whichever feels best to you. Clara's won a lot of grants, so she's
I have
probably
not.
right. You've won more grants than me.
Tell us in the comments, DSLR or phone, if you were applying, which one would you do? And I know, of course, not everybody has access to a
Yeah.
DSLR, but let's just say in theory, which one would you go through?
I'm not opposed to DSLR. I have one and I do take photos with it, but I switched over I don't know, last year, 2 years ago, because my DSLR makes the photos really yellow, and nobody, not even the camera expert guy at the camera shop, could figure out why it does this thing. So maybe I just have a really biased bad DSLR.
Selena says, I have a former professor who's lovely and checks my statements. That's another thing. So many people write artist statements and maybe they don't have a lot of experience writing one and they never get it edited by anybody. And I think that's a big mistake.
Yeah, I've fallen into that mistake.
Another thing to consider as well is we have lots of places you can get feedback. For example, if you are in art club, I do review statements during discussion voice sessions and also in the critique channel. And then we also have a service, which is where you can get nitty gritty edits from me on your artist statement. So I would say, unless you are super experienced, this is really not something that you want to do entirely on your own. Another thing, look at the timeline for the grant, because some of the grants get announced 2 weeks before the window opens. And then the window is like 3 weeks. And so what I used to do in the past is I would look at all the applications as soon as I found out about them. And I would also subscribe to the email list. That was extremely
Yes.
helpful. And
Yes.
I would just mark up the things, because the Utah grant, they said, okay, it's due March 7th. And they said notifications will be the end of April. Now that is super short. There's some grants where it's like 8 months later.
Yeah, it's all over the place. And then there's some grants too. I really suggest signing up for the email list, even though we're all on way too many email
Do
lists
it.
at this point. But there's some grants, or not grants, but residencies too do this, where they will only accept the first 200 applications or something like that. There's this residency called, I think it's the Fountainhead residency. It's in Florida, and it's a nice one, and they only take the first 250 applications, and every time I've seen it, it's already, they're already full. So you want to be part of that email list to see when it comes out first.
Good point from Salinas. I generally go DSLR. It switches my mindset, makes me take more care when composing the image.
That's true.
I triple check a million things, like you guys saw me zooming in and out. On a phone, I don't tend to do that as much, and I do spend more time on the photo shopping. And Juris says, I'm on my thesis production now. I've been looking up opportunities after my undergrad. You gotta
Perfect timing.
research everything. There's so
Yeah.
many grants that are not popular that really can help you a lot. For example, I won a grant from the Puffin Foundation. That is not a common grant. I also won one from Berkshire Taconic Community Foundation. That's one in Massachusetts. Everybody knows, well, not everybody, but most people have heard of the Guggenheim and
Mm-hmm.
the really, really big ones. But the little ones can do pretty well. The Berkshire Taconic one was $4,000.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely look into those smaller. Also, look into the smaller ones, because they're probably not going to get as many applications, or the ones that are super niche and you just happen to fit all of the requirements for it. That limits the number of people who are applying, which means you've got a higher chance of getting the money or support or whatever it is.
We do have in the description several places that have good listings for grants. And of course, we have our own page on our website, and you can see we've categorized them. Some of these are specifically for a comics artist, some are for film. And here's another place where you have to really look at people who win, because the film grants, they're not for YouTubers for the most part. Maybe they'll to it in the future. But for now, a lot of it's for documentary filmmaking. And so film may seem, oh, film, yeah, I know what that is. But you have to know the type of film, because it's
Oh,
such a
yeah,
gigantic
yeah.
field.
I had a friend just the other day send me ones for shorts, and shorts are different from feature film and require totally different things. So it's that is something I'm also getting used to, because I used to be the person that said, "Oh, film, yeah, film. They're all the same, but they're really, really not." And there are also different stages of film. So some grants are for getting that raw footage, and some are for post production, and some are for, I don't know, putting your film out into the world. I forget what that's called. So it's all over the place, highly specific.
Another thing is they're so hard to win. I always expect that I will not win it. When I win, I feel like I've won the lottery. And honestly, it doesn't have a lot to do with, oh, you're a terrible artist,
Yeah.
therefore you didn't win. Some of these are thousands of applications. And at that point, people who apply to the Guggenheim are pretty qualified. Just to fill out an application that's not total crap is a crazy amount of work. And you
Yeah.
need all of the background and professional experience just to fill that out. Because a lot of people on the Guggenheim, they might get to the budget and go, oh my God, I have no idea. But a
Yeah.
budget should be extremely detailed because they want a project proposal in addition to the artist grant and 3 letters of
Oh,
recommendation.
this was something interesting that Eloise told me that I did not know, but is supposedly very important. Is that if they ask for those expense sheets, those budgets, you should include a line that pays for yourself as the
Yes,
artist, your labor. Otherwise, you're not taken seriously. The juror people or whatever, other people will laugh at you. I did not realize this. I just said, "Oh yeah, I'm an artist. I always make my work and not expect anything for it." But that is not seen as professional to do that.
especially public art. I've been looking at some listings here in Utah because I don't have anything else to do. And some of them, you look at it, you're like, oh, $100,000, I can hire a foundry to do all these things. And you forget that, guess what? That's your time. You have to
Yeah.
budget. If the project takes you a year and it's full time, give yourself $60,000 of that 100,000.
Right, right, because they don't want you to burn out on it, and they don't want your whatever your money job is to take what's it precedence over getting the project done.
When you have not gotten the grant, which I'm guessing has happened before, I don't think anybody likes it. It stinks to get a letter that says you didn't get it. But this is what you should not do. People ask me this all the time. If you don't get the grant, don't inquire and ask why you didn't get it. Because I don't know any grant that will give you detailed feedback and say, here's why you didn't get it. You can if you want to, it's not going to hurt you, but you're not going to get the answer that you want.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever tried to do that, but definitely I know people that have, and it's usually not worth it. Although there are some people, I have seen this, and I do appreciate that this exists. I've seen this more for open calls, though. There are some jurors that will say, if you want, and there are some grants too and residencies that say, if you want, we can offer you some short feedback on your application and say why it wasn't chosen. It's usually very limited, but that is a very nice, dare I say, progressive thing for a juror to give their time to do this. And you should not do it unless it's something that's offered to you.
Keep applying because, as we said, the jurors are different every year. It's rare that a grant is the exact same juror or the exact same committee, because even if you say, oh, okay, this is a private foundation, it's judged by the board isn't the same for 20 years. There's always people who come in and out. And so just because you don't get it one year doesn't mean you're rejected for life.
Yeah. Yeah. I also, you pointed something out, Clara, earlier on the sheet. You know how we were talking, you had the grants list on our website, and I saw Fulbrights on there, and somebody had asked earlier about changes in grants right now with the administration. I was actually recently on the Fulbright website, and they are having a lot of ongoing changes right now because of shifts in administration and funding. So that would be an instance of checking that out. I believe the Fulbright is what largely funded by the government. So there's an example of check the whole web page, see if your specific thing is still available.
The Fulbright grant, in case you don't know about it, that is a grant which is to do your work in a foreign country. The thing about the Fulbright that I have heard, and I've never applied before, is that you have to apply for a certain country. So you say,
Yeah.
okay, I'm applying for a Fulbright. I want to study in France. Guess what? So does everybody else. And so if you apply for a country that's not as popular, like let's say you want to apply to study in Taiwan, that's not remotely as popular as all the artists who want to do their residency in Italy. And so, again, do the research and find out what kind of projects. The Fulbright is also for any field. I knew somebody who was a classical saxophonist and won a grant to go study music in Vienna. And so, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of these, you're applying to do a particular thing. For
Yeah.
example, the Rome Prize, which is one of the biggest fellowships, is to study for 1 year. I think it's through the American Academy of Rome in Rome for a whole year. However, you have to explain why your project requires you to live in Rome in
Yeah.
person. And if you don't have a proposal that explains that or is very weak, I want to get inspiration from art history. Like that's not going to fly for that application.
Yeah. Yeah. For this one here for Juris 1527. This is, yeah, I was looking into what Fulbright would be for, say, like Hungary or some of the other places that we're looking at for our film to see if it's possible to do it through that. And that was where I found the information on the Fulbright site about funds being frozen right now. So you're exactly right on that.
Remember, we do have a service where you can get your artist statement edited, and that's especially helpful if you are applying for an MFA program. And we do have a MFA ebook available, which provides a very specific sequence of things that need to happen to prepare a portfolio. We have spaces open in some upcoming workshops, for example, gesture drawing, sparkly painting with Mia, crayon, marker, and also oil painting, which is coming up very soon. And we also are going to have a Discord chat. So meet us in the discussions channel that is underneath the live streams category. And we will be hanging out there to talk about more related things and probably sushi. So we'll talk to you guys next time. Thank you so much. Bye.
See ya.